So hello everyone and welcome to this video in which we are going to be performing a live analysis of CAT 2024. So this paper, all three mentors have taken today. So Ajay sir has taken slot 1, I have taken slot 2 and Kushal has taken slot 3. So we'll be looking at all three slots section by section and we'll be talking about the level of difficulty of each and every slot. We will be getting a sense of understanding of what was the significant points that we felt were noteworthy inside these sections. We will also discuss what was a good number of attempts and the sectional cutoffs that we think will be required in order to score a 99 percentile. And we will at the end also talk about what we feel is going to be a good enough score to clear the 99 percentile mark in this paper. So let's start off this video by first talking about the VRC section of the CAT paper. So I'll start with Ajay sir. Sir, you have taken slot 1, so what were your impressions?
So in the VRC section, one thing that was very different from last year's paper, which I felt, was that in the last year's paper, my paper started entirely with reading comprehension questions, and it went on for the first 16 questions with reading comprehension, and then we had the rest of the questions, the verbal reasoning questions, right? This time it was all jumbled up. So my paper started with the two sentence placement question, and then after that I had two summary questions, and then the RC started, the reading comprehension. So I think that was one change which I felt in the paper. But overall, if I look at the paper was something very similar to what was last year's paper. So you had 4 reading comprehensions, and all these 4 reading comprehensions had 4 questions each, right? And the length of the passage was almost similar to what it was last time. And I had one passage on history, one passage on economics, and there was other 2 passages which were also one on psychology. So it was kind of mix of passages, but overall I felt that it was a very readable passage. Questions, I did not feel there were too many critical reasoning based questions this time, and the questions were easy to answer is what I felt from the paper. So I feel the paper was a bit more a bit more easier, I would say, than the last year's paper, or probably the same at the level of the last year.
Right. So I have very similar impressions about this section in slot 2 as well. One more change that I want to point out before I talk about slot 2 is that parajumbles as a kind of a question from the paper has been removed completely this year, which I feel is a step in the right direction, because that is one type of question which I don't particularly like, and I won't get into the depths of it. But there's a very quantitative reason why I don't like the parajumbles question, because it has got 24 possible options when every other type of question has in essence 4 options. So I think odd status parajumbles still makes sense because there are only 5 possible or likely correct answers for those. As far as difficulty of the paper is concerned, I completely agree with Ajay sir that it was very similar to last year's paper. There was nothing very difficult to read as far as the language of the passage is concerned. The topics of discussion, although that might be a bit alien, but it was not something which is abstract or something which we will not be able to wrap our heads around, like two philosophical topics were not actually delved into. But I did feel that the passages were a dry read, in the sense that I could not, like generally when I read a passage in the CAT paper, I feel very happy reading it because I learn something new. It's very unique.
It was an easy read, I think.
It was an easy read. No doubt that the language and the vocabulary was not a problem. I just didn't feel interested in the passage, and I feel that every time that I'm interested in reading the passage, automatically my capability to reason out the answers becomes better.
So I agree with that also, because I still very clearly remember last few years' papers when we had done the reading comprehension. Between me and Varun, we always had the discussion that this passage was so beautifully written. And when you have that idea in your mind while reading the reading comprehension, you typically get interested in understanding the essence of the passage. But when it is a dry read, I believe that becomes a bit difficult for you to get down to the depth of that topic to that great extent.
It's absolutely true. So that is one point because of which I feel that maybe it makes passage a bit difficult to understand and keep track of. And one more thing that I found in the questions in the reading comprehension exercise of my slot especially was that there were questions which required us to scrutinize exactly what's been asked and understand that, and only then go to the option. So a lot of negatives, a lot of double negatives, like one of the following are true, except I had a question which also asked that which of the following, if false, will disagree with the author. So questions like that will take a bit of time.
The first lot, those kind of questions were not that many.
Okay.
It was more direct. So, I felt that probably in slot 2 and slot 3, there were more such questions as compared to slot 1.
Right. So maybe that can be the reason for slightly decreased level of difficulty in slot 1 as compared to slot 2 and slot 3. And I also felt that apart from one passage where the options were very easily eliminatable, In the remaining passages, I did feel that I had to go back to the passage multiple times in order to verify exactly what's written and exactly what's not. So a lot of care and a bit of time-consuming activity the questions were. So because of all those reasons, I will peg this year's VRC section to be slightly of a higher level difficulty than last year. I felt the verbal ability section was pretty doable. Among the severe questions, I felt one summary question was very straightforward for me. The remaining two, I am still a bit confused between a couple of options. Similarly, I felt that the fill in the blanks questions, two were very simple. One was slightly ambiguous for me. Odds and parajumbles, I could very easily figure out one question's sentence which was odd one out. The other set of five sentences I felt were kind of discussing the same topic, so I could not figure out exactly which was the odd sentence. So overall put together, marginally more difficult than last year's VRC section is my takeaway for slot 2.
So as far as slot 3 is concerned, I believe out of the 4 reading comprehensions that were given, there was one reading comprehension which was definitely a bit more difficult read in comparison to the other 3. So my first 3 reading comprehensions were easy reads. They were not very difficult to comprehend. There was not much of a higher order vocabulary used. There was not a topic that you cannot understand. So first 3 were very easy reads, but the fourth one was slightly more tricky read. That's one understanding of the 4 reading comprehensions. When it comes to questions, and I completely agree with Varun, and that is what happened on slot 3 also, that there were a lot of double negatives questions in my paper. In fact, all of the 4 reading comprehensions, I could see at least 1 or 2 questions where there was a double negative. And after reading the question, before even you go to the options, you will have to actually read the question once again. That just to understand what exactly is the question asking you. And that made my life a little more difficult on the 4 reading comprehensions that we did. Also, I felt that for some reason, the time that was required to read the reading comprehensions was a little lower in comparison to the last year's paper, because I still very clearly remember last year's paper, I could read 4 reading comprehensions and that's it. I was not able to get into the verbal ability part of the paper. But this year I had about 6 minutes of time left with me after completing all the reading comprehension questions to get into the verbal ability section, and I could do 2 more questions on that. So I feel it was easy read, but questions were definitely tricky. One more thing that I want to point out as far as reading comprehension is concerned, that out of the 4 options, 2 were always very easily eliminated. But you will get down to 2 options, which will turn out to be very difficult to understand. And frankly speaking, a lot of questions I'm still not sure if I have marked the right answer or not. Because as Varun keeps telling us that once you've got down to 2 options, you should mark the answer. So I went on to mark the answers. I'm not sure whether I picked up the right answer or not. But it almost out of 16 questions, I can very easily say 6-7 questions. When I got down to the last 2 options, it was difficult to choose between the 2 options. So that to my mind makes the paper a bit more difficult in comparison to the last year's paper.
So what I'm feeling is, the slot 1's paper is comparatively easier as compared to slot 2 and slot 3, because definitely the double negative questions were hardly any in that first paper. I think there were 1 or 2, but then it wasn't filled with those kind of questions, right? So, and it was more of straight, questions, and you could, you could eliminate easily 2 of them, but then you'll be stuck with the last 2, and then you need to figure out, which one of them would be the right choice. So I think from what I'm hearing now, probably slot 1 was a bit more easier compared to slot 2.
So to sum up, VRC, I think the cutoff for 99 percentile will go slightly lower as compared to last year's. That's the impression that we are getting. So that's all that we will talk about VRC for now. We will discuss the session cutoffs for it later on. Let's move on to the next section, which is the DLR section. So you can start off.
So very different DILR session this time. So we had 20 questions last time, we have 22. And then we had 4 sets last time, we have 5 sets this time. And last year there was hardly any DI in any of the slots, right? And this time there were 3 DIs in the slot. And 2 of the LRs were also number based. And in slot 1 especially, we had 2 questions which were graphical based. And it was, easy to pick and choose, I would say, because almost all the questions were doable. So all sets were doable. That was the good thing about the paper. So anybody who would have prepared for LRDI section and had spent a bit of time on DI, they would have easily been able to pick up the set, one of the DI sets initially to start off, finish it off, and then look ahead for picking up one more. And there's ample choice out there to pick up. So the two LR sets each had 5 questions, and the 3 DI sets had 4 questions each, and that was how it was. So in the first slot, I felt one of the LR, which was the first question that I also picked up, which was on games and tournaments, and that was an easy question to pick. And anybody who has done few games and tournaments question would have spent 15 minutes on that question and easily solved it. So it was not very tough. It had not much of complication, and you could have easily finished it off in 15 minutes and then gone ahead. And there were 3 DI sections there, so you could have questions there. So you could have picked up any one of them and then done it, right? So I picked up one of the sets which was based on a bar graph, and then that was an easy set to do. There was one of the questions which was a set theory kind of a question, and then there was another one where you need to make the table and do the stock market question, the candlestick question, which was there. So candlestick question was the easier one. So first I did the graph question, then I went back, picked up the candlestick question, and then did it. And that was again to be about 12 to 15 minutes to finish it off. I could not finish my third set because I started off, I had about 10 minutes to that. But then by the time I reached the question and I was solving it, the time got over. So 2 sets easily were doable, but 2 sets would probably take you to 10 or 9 questions depending on what you would have to do.
Red slot 2, I think, was very similar in terms of the nature of the sets. What I find as a pattern in the CAT papers over the past few years is that we are slowly and steadily leaning towards more numerical logic based sets. And all 5 sets in my slot were numerical logic based. In fact, there is only one set which is pure LR, in which a bit of averages and numbers were also involved, but the rest of the 4 sets were all based upon whether we can understand numbers and we can understand what is greater, what is lesser, how to find out percentages and ratios and weighted averages. So it's a lot of numerical logic. Plus, every single set, apart from that set of LR, was very time consuming in terms of calculation. So whenever we have sets like these, I find it not to my liking, basically because I feel that the nuance of LR sets are a bit lost. That you don't have a set where you have to think there's an inflection point, that one clue gives away how to start off the set. And then from there, how a domino effect happens and you figure out multiple different things. In these sets, what actually happens is you know exactly what needs to be done. It is then just hard work and toil and labor that you have to calculate everything step by step and make sure that you're not making any kind of calculation mistakes. So even though there were 5 sets, I didn't feel that selecting the set was actually was tested as a capability. Because
definitely not. Because you could have picked up any and then finished it off.
Because every single set, once you read, you know that, okay, this is what I have to do. So it's not like there is some set that you figure out while reading it itself that, oh, this I can approach like this. So that nuance was lost, which I don't like about LRD. I like that nuance to be present. So you could have selected any set, but then even though you know exactly what to do, the sets are lengthy. And which means that factor of more than 2 sets is very difficult to get to, even though you know exactly how to solve it, because it's very time consuming and time taking. And that's why I feel that everyone could have actually solved 9 questions by solving 2 sets of 5 plus 4, or maybe 2 sets of 5 plus 5, at the best 10 questions, but not more than that. One more thing which made this section a bit more labor intensive is that there are a lot of data questions. So option based MCQ questions were less. And what options often do is that it gives you a confidence in your solution. But when there is calculation and there is data, there is always a doubt in the mind that have I performed the calculation correctly, because no option is going to verify whether I've done something right or not. So all these put together, I feel that solving more than 9 questions would be a Herculean task. And I personally solved 2 sets, and after that I had about 12 minutes left. I could not get to a third set. Maybe some really smart people could have actually gotten to that level of solving more than 2 sets. But I think attempting 2 sets was a good effort.
Right? Good attempt, yeah.
No, I think Varun, you hit the nail on the head when it comes to LRDA section. I believe that, one thing that is out of the window and that we kept talking about while doing the mocks is select the right set. And I think that has gone for a toss. And that is where I think when I tried to do this paper by the same way that I was doing writing the mocks and selecting a question, and I came down to a situation where I felt everything looks easy, doable, right? So it was very difficult for me to pick up that one set and start. And by the time I actually started my first set, I realized that I've lost about 7 to 8 minutes of time. So I'm in 32 minutes left and I'm now starting my first set. Typically, my LRDA does not happen to be strong. So I took a little longer time to solve that one set that I picked up, which I very strongly believe that somebody who would have picked up that set could have done it very easily. It was an intersection based set where there are three parallel roads in terms of the columns as well as in terms of the rows. And then there is an intersection point, and you have to understand that at some of these intersection points, there is an ATM and all of that was there. So I think that particular set was very doable, and somebody was prepared really well would actually do that set in about 10 to 12 minutes. That gets you to another set. And there you will take about, let's say, like Varun said, that in each of the set, you would know what to do. But it's just typically going to take a bit more time. So you can then get into the second set and finish it. But beyond that, to go to the third set, I think it's very challenging on this particular paper to get into the third set to my mind. So I think anyone who has been able to cross two sets has done exceptionally well on this paper. Two were doable with a lot of practice in your mocks and you have paid a lot of attention to LRDA section. Then two of the sets can be done, and I think then 1.5 to 2 sets correct completely turns out to be a very good attempt on the slot 3 at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that completing one set and moving on to the second set should have been done by a serious aspirant in this paper. 2 sets completely. If you have done, then you can be rest assured that your number of attempts is good. You don't have to worry about anything.
I think slot 1 here again, in DILR, I think was easier as compared to the other two.
No, I think that is correct also, because I have come across students who have gone on to solve the third set also, in the slot 1. So I have a couple of students whom I spoke to. They gave me this impression that they were able to get
the DI set was very easy to solve because it had very simple calculations. So it was not very tedious calculation at all. Numbers were very easy, ending with zeros. Candlesticks chair question. So I think slot 1 was slightly easier as compared to the other two.
So probably both VRC and LRDI, slot 1 was slightly more easier than slot 2 and slot 3. One thing I just want to point out about one of the sets of slot 2 is there was a Sudoku type of set where you had to put in 10 numbers into 10 spots. And that set had options. And yet the options were not indicative of the fact that whether you will reach a concrete unique solution or not. So even an option-based question, you're always doubting yourself because you've come up with one single possible outcome or possible result, but you don't know whether there's a second possibility or not. And that again made that short set seem like a long set. So overall, a lengthy paper is what IIMCalcutta has made in terms
of fact, when you were mentioning this last part of your conversation, I realized that this is same thing that happened on that intersections set also. That it was purely a Sudoku based set. Once you've got your first clue, it was about Sudoku, and there were a couple of case that will come up. One of the case you will have to reject, and you will have to move on to the second case and prove that, and that will turn out to be the right one. So, and again, the options over there. One of the options was cannot be determined. The question was, for how many intersection points would you be able to locate everything correctly? And that's a theta question. So you again don't know whether you are going into the right direction or not. I think a very well prepared paper in terms to trap these students. We like it or we don't like it. We have different opinions on how the paper should be set. But I think a good paper set has been done on this.
So 40 minutes, 4 sets, or 40 minutes, 5 sets?
I would go by 40 minutes, 4 set any given day, because the 5th set, though it gives you an option.
But you had more DI and more choice to pick up, no? Because you are a quant trainer. So.
No, I understand. That gives you a more choice to play around. It gave them an ability to introduce one DI set also extra, and there was a space to accommodate a DI also. But I, for some reason, still feel that 4 sets, you have limited option choices. You get down to 1 set, can conclude that, get into the second set. Now over here, there can be some of these students who would want to say that, oh, let me do 2 5 question set and not do a 4 question set because the number of questions are lesser there and I'm going to anyways take time. But what it also does is that it allows you to do 2 sets and it leaves you insufficient time for the third one. So typically, I would come across students who would say, like, my last 10 minutes for this, because there it's difficult to conclude an LRDA set in 10 minutes. So last 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 9 minutes of the paper, of several students' paper, I'm sure were not productive time. Wherein, if you have a 4 set with 5 questions each, then you end up doing 10 question sets. And that, to my mind, improves the
But
score.
I seriously feel in the 4 set, paper, it was very difficult to do the third set. But here, the questions were comparatively easier. So, a student who's really good at DILR probably could have cracked that third set.
Correct.
I will go in a slightly different direction as both of you. I prefer 5 sets in 40 minutes. But I feel IIM Calcutta has gotten the recipe for it. That you make 5 sets and you test a person's ability to select. You give them more options, selection becomes more difficult. You include nuances in the sets so that a person who's being able to, while reading, figure out that how to start off with the solution. What is the exact point that you have to begin the set with? That person will get rewarded for their efforts. I feel that selecting the sets among 4 is easier. But when you have got more options, selection becomes slightly more difficult. So I hope that next year they have 5 sets, but they make the set slightly better so that not everything is
So,
calculated.
paper
So
wasn't
whatever-
challenging. You could have picked up any question and then finish it.
No, whatever they do, I want to see someday cat not changing its color for 10 consecutive days. That is where I really want to see the cat paper, because it creates an unnecessary anxiety amongst the students that we don't know what is going to happen. So if they could have come up with, let's say 3 months back, saying that we'll give you 5, 5, 4, 4, 4, students would have been better prepared to take this paper rather than, first set of students, slot 1 students getting in, not realizing 3 sets, 4 sets. Then in your sample paper, you introduce 2 questions, and over here you make it 4, 4, 4, and 5, 5.
And second
I
and
don't
third,
get that logic.
second and third slot students would have got an advantage. They knew what's going to happen.
Correct. So I don't understand that, when in that sample paper, you introduce a set of 2 questions and you took that pain of introducing 2 questions. Why would you not take a pain of saying 5, 5, 4, 4, 4 in that paper at least?
I feel that the motto that IIM Consortium follows is mystery is part of the fun. So that is always going to hold that they are going to throw surprises.
But I think this is very devilish approach to sit back when you are not writing the paper and just see
Sadistic.
students sadistic. So very very sadistic. Like if you talk about GRE or a GMAT paper, students know what they are up against. They can prepare really well. But I think that is for another
It's
day.
not
a
standardized
discussion
as
for
well.
another- Yes, I would want to see a cat paper which has not changed its color absolutely for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. And through my journey from 2010, I've not really seen cats sticking to a pattern for a more than 2 years period. So that is a bit disappointing for me. After having observed cat paper for about 15, 16 years.
Right. So let's quickly move on to the quant section. So again, so you can start with strong one.
So compared to last year, this year I was very happy when I saw this bonds paper because it started off with arithmetic questions, right? And the good thing is those were questions that we have seen before and we have encountered before. Last year, I remember I started off and the first 5 questions in my paper was algebra, and some of the questions it was so difficult to solve. Whereas this time you could look at the question and say, yeah, solvable. Let's go ahead and try it out. So there were so many such questions in the paper which I encountered as I went along. Second thing is arithmetic and algebra, 16 questions in slot 1, and that's like taking away the majority of the paper. I'm slightly disappointed that geometry there were only 2 questions, but number system had 4 questions and 1 question from permutation combination. So overall, the paper is as predicted kind of a paper. Like there are questions which you normally see in your textbook, normally see when you're practicing. So it gives you a good feeler when you're looking at the paper. And there were questions which you could have picked and then gone ahead and solved it. There were some questions which you could have solved it using the options, correct? And there were also questions which you could have gotten into and try to solve it, but then you found, okay, calculation is going to take a lot of time. And then there are 3 equations getting formed, 3 variables, and then sitting and solving equations. So overall, for me, a person who has prepared for CAT, he could have found questions in the paper that they could have picked up and then started solving. Unlike, the kind of last year's paper where you would have probably skipped 5, 7 questions before reaching a question where you say, okay, this is solvable. So paper looked way easier than last year's paper is what I think.
I'll completely agree with that, that the paper was way more easier because the number of doable questions were more. Like I knew that if I had more time, I could have solved more questions. Last year, I had time, but I didn't know how to solve questions. Of course, I'm not a quant trainer, so lack of knowledge is also kind of an issue for me. Slot 2 was very, very similar to whatever Ajay is saying. Almost all the questions were doable, but questions were lengthy and questions were calculation intensive in the sense that I had my calculator open in every alternate question in order to perform calculation. One question we had to calculate 2 power 5 into 3 power 8 minus 5 to get to the correct answer, and all the options were 5-digit numbers. So I find these kind of questions to be contrary to the essence of CAT, because I feel that CAT should reward conceptual understanding over calculation capability. And although there were a lot of questions which are doable, I don't think that people would have been able to solve too many more questions as compared to last year. Basically, because every single question was a 3.5 minute question. There were no sitters like there used to be in 2021. I remember there were 2 to 3 questions, which you look at the question and you know that you do this step and you get to the answer. And in 30 seconds, 40 seconds, I would have concluded 1 or 2 questions in that paper. But those kind of questions were absent. The distribution of questions across topics was good this year. I think arithmetic algebra were given equal amount of weightage. Geometry, I am disappointed personally because I am a geometry trainer, and there were 2 questions. But what I'm really happy with is that I feel the quality of algebra and arithmetic questions and number systems questions were bad, to put it mildly. That they were bad because, again, less of conceptual understanding, more of calculation capability. But the 2 geometry questions were very nice in the sense that a person who reads it carefully, draws the figure, will then suddenly remember that, oh, this is an application of so and so concept. So it does reward preparation, it does reward geometry based aptitude. So those 2 questions of geometry were really nice. I feel it was a race against time. So the mantra for this
number system questions were also good, except for probably that remainder question before that.
I personally don't like number system because I've never touched it in my life. So I, by mistake, solved one single number system question, which I somehow figured out how to get to the correct answer. So I cannot comment much on it. Arithmetic questions, I had a time and work question, just like Sir was pointing out. There are three variables, three equations, and the equations were long, and we had 2 variables in one equation, 2 variables in the second, and all 3 variables in the third. So doing all of that and then getting to the correct answer in 3.5, 4 minutes, it's too much of a tiring adventure to go into during the examination itself. I feel that anyone who can move fast with the paper, understand that I'm not going to pick up longer questions, I'm going to pick up shorter questions because almost all questions are doable, would have been able to attempt a lot of questions, and that is what is going to lead to a good score. Anyone who is going to just stick to a question because he'll know how to solve it and then labor through the solution of it is going to lose out on some slightly smaller questions.
So slot 1 and slot 2, there were similar questions.
Similar questions.
So students had said that there were some small changes here and there, but the context of the question was almost similar.
Yeah, premise of the question, the context of the question, numbers here and there, something was asked and something was given, and then in slot 2, that thing which was asked was given, and that thing which was given was asked. So those kind of very similar questions were present in slot 1 and slot 2. I think slot 3 was slightly different as far as point is concerned.
Slot 3, when you look at the distribution across the chapters, it remains almost similar. So you had about 7 to 8 questions of arithmetics, and then 7 to 8 questions of algebra, followed by about 1 question of permutations and combinations, which was a clear permutations and combination question, arrangement question basically. And then you had number system questions there. And again, the geometry questions, even after me being not really good at geometry, I could see 2 of the questions which are very doable in my set from geometry. And provided I had few values in my mind, I could have probably solved those. But then I regret not studying geometry. So that's the problem. But then this is one thing that they've kept consistent in comparison to last year's paper. That 7-8 arithmetics question, 7-8 algebra question, that covers majority of the paper, and that I really liked. So there was no surprise there in terms of the questions. Now coming to the questions, I still believe that there were about 6-7 trap questions on the slot 3 paper, where if a student gets in, spends a time in this, and don't understand that you got to move on, or this is a question to dodge, will suffer on this paper. You will not be able to do more number of questions.
Calculation.
No, not calculations. The idea behind the question was also slightly more tricky. We being trainer, and after doing training for such a long time, I believe we get an idea of what an examiner is trying to do, because we have been on the other side of the table and we understand the psychology there. So I could trace that, okay, fine, this question can be done like this question can be done like this. But if it comes to students trying to solve those questions, I think it will be difficult for them to reach there with about 7 months, 8 months, 9 months of preparation across all these 3 sections. So I think that is where the challenge was. But I also agree to this, that there were very, very familiar questions in the paper. That means you would have done while solving your material, and those kind of questions, about 4 or 5 questions, were always there, and that makes your life a bit more easier on the paper. as Varun very rightly pointed out, you got to move on the paper. If you're not moving on the paper, it is going to create a trouble. Just to give you an example, first 8 minutes of my paper, I could not do anything because my first 3-4 questions were difficult. One of the questions I got stuck for no good reason, and the second one was difficult. The third one also turned out to be difficult. I thought I've lost it on this period. But in the last 32 minutes, I could solve an appreciable number of questions. So
Kushal, how much was the appreciable number of questions?
appreciable number of questions was 12, one less than what you did. After
So
claiming not
that's
to be a quant
So
trainer.
that's a humble brag by Kushal that even though he lost 8 minutes at the beginning of the paper, still he put us all 12 questions in the paper.
Right. So, but then the point was that after that, I decided that I'm not going to get stuck with any question. I look at the question in a minute. If I'm able to get it, I'll do it. Otherwise, I'll move on. And that helped me, clearly to move on the paper. I, once again had to rely on that intuition that this is looking like a 4-line question and I got to leave and move on because it's going to take time for me to read and I don't have time on the paper. But the moment I got about 4 or 5 questions under my belt, I started feeling more confident about the abilities and then went on to finish the paper. So I could read all 22 questions. I could understand where the questions are coming from. So that was doable. But I still believe this was not a very easy paper. It was not a very straightforward paper. It was slightly challenging. It was a good day for me that whatever first thought came to my head about a question and it worked. But I think for students to expect this from the students is not fair. But about 6, 7, 8 months of preparation. So we have been doing this for a very, very long time.
So Kushal, not very calculation intensive. Your
Yes, my slot was not very calculation intensive. That can be one conclusion. Or for some reason, I dodged the questions which were calculation intensive.
I'm having a feeling that slot 3 was the toughest slot.
So I think if I very clearly remember, there was only one question where I had to pick up my calculator and do a long calculation, which I guessed and I got it wrong. I know that now. But otherwise, if I would have tried to use the calculator, then I would have taken a little more longer time. It would have taken me at least 45 seconds to use that calculator and do 1.29 times in order to get to the desired answer. So that is the problem on that paper. And I guessed it at 8 and I got it wrong. So I think I got it wrong. Now I don't very clearly remember the question, so there might be a problem there. But I think it is not a very straightforward paper. It's a 9 attempt, a very good attempt on quant kind of a paper to manage.
Right, so that paints a picture of all 3 sections across all 3 slots. So let's now venture and understand what we believe are going to be the 99 percentile cutoffs for each section. So I think I'll take VRC and you guys can pitch in if you feel the slot 1 or slot 3 has been different. Last year, the VRC section 99 percentile cutoff was 40 plus. So people could actually score 40 plus and in that paper, which I felt was definitely easier because options were very easily eliminatable in that paper, which is not the case in this year. So I feel that the cutoff will go between 35 to 40. If I have to pinpoint an exact number, I'd say that 37 is a good score to land on as far as 99 percentile in VRC is concerned. So you guys
last year cutoff was somewhere about 41.
41 at around 41 scale score. So you are looking at getting to that marks to get a 99%. So I think I completely agree with what
paper was more or less similar.
More or less similar. I think the increased difficulty in terms of the options and double negatives would probably reduce it by one question, and that brings us to about 37 marks, 37, 38 marks, which is where I think a 90 percentile should be, 99 percentile should be on the VRC section. Across all 3 slots, I think.
Yeah, across all 3 slots.
So 35 to 40, we are all sticking at 37 at this
37
point for 99 percentile in VRC.
LR, I think 99 percentile, a good student who has put in a lot of effort, done about 400, 500 sets during his preparation, should be able to do about 2 sets. So somewhere about 25 to 27 is what I'll pitch 99%.
I'll also go by the same thing because I believe in my paper also one of the set was very easily doable, which had about 5 questions on it. And then I think there was one more set always there for a picking. So a very good student who is expected to get a 99 on the section should be able to finish 2 LRDI sets. So I would go by a 26, 27 at a 99 percentile.
Unlike last year, I would not be surprised if you see a lot of people 99.5 plus, so having 3 sets completed. So probably there could be a scale up.
I think 3 sets completed will be very difficult. I would put that at 99.9. In fact, for 3 sets completed, maybe 3 sets, third set started.
Yeah.
My
couple of
With one or
questions.
two questions.
Yeah.
I will go slightly lower than both of you. I will go at around 24 or maybe 23. And the logic behind my prediction is that I think 2 sets were doable. So 9 questions should ideally fetch you 27 marks. But because there is so much of calculations involved and there are a lot of data questions, I feel that it's very easy to make a small calculation mistake or leave out a particular case that has to be calculated, and that can lead to one error. So even really good students can make that one error among 9 questions, which will bring down their score from 27 to 24, or if it's a negative mark question, then 23. So I feel that 23, 24 is my personal take.
So somewhere about 23 to 27?
20, 24, 23, 24 to 27. So it can be somewhere anywhere about 25, 26 kind of a number as well. Right.
And one question?
So I believe quant is seemingly easier in comparison to the last year's paper. There is no doubt about it. But after written the slot 3, I still believe that the paper was not very straightforward. So to my mind, a 9 questions attempt is a very good attempt. A 99 percentile, I expect them to do about 10, 11 questions at least and get 1 or 2 incorrect. So that brings me somewhere between 27 to 30 marks for a 99 percentile on the quantitative ability section, at least for slot 3. This is what my perception is.
27 to 30.
Okay. So slot 2, I will go slightly higher because I generally am pretty bad at managing time in quant, but particularly because I have not practiced a lot of algebra or even arithmetic for that matter. And I'm absolutely clueless when it comes to number system. And I have a bone to pick with IIM Calcutta that the one PNC question that they gave, which is one of my favorite topics, by the way, that was like a short reading comprehension exercise. And to solve it, I think I would have had to spend about 5 to 6 minutes. So I could not solve that either, and I don't think most people would have picked that question up. But yet, with all these difficulties, I was able to attempt 13 questions, which sometimes or very rarely even happens when I take mocks. So I feel that if I can attempt 13 questions, really good students whose strength is quants should be able to get to 10, 11 attempts. So I'm going to say 30 as a 99 percentile cutoff, not 27. I feel the 10 questions people or 10, 11 questions people could have attempted and gotten 10 right. So I'm going to say 30 in slot 2 for 99 percentile in quant. Now let's talk about the overall paper. Just to give you a context, last year CAT 23, I had taken the paper in slot 1, and in slot 1, people with 76, 77 marks also ended up with a 99 percentile.
As a raw score.
As a raw score. In slot 1, raw score 76, 77, even ended up with a 99 percentile. This year, the paper was easy because BRC saw similar level difficulty. LRD is definitely easier. Quant is also much more easier. So I feel that the cutoff is going to go up, and I think all three of us agree that the score around which 99 percentile should lie will be 90. 90. I feel that 90 is a safe score. At least I feel that 90 is a safe score to get a 99 percentile. I feel that if you are getting 90 as soon as the key is released, I think key will be released in another 3 or 4 days. Generally, it gets released very quickly. If you calculate and if you find that you have a 90, you can be rest assured that you will get a 99 percentile. I will not be surprised personally if it goes slightly less than 90 as well. I don't see it going more than 90.
So I think 90 or plus minus 2, which is between 88 to 92. I think
Depending
should be a
on the
99, depending upon the slot. That is where I believe 88 to 92 should be the 99 percentile.
I
If we
think
can give a
slot
range.
1, there could be a possibility of it, extending by 2 marks.
Right.
Yeah, because of VRC and MVAL.
Right.
So although the paper was easier, why we are not saying that the 99 percentile is going to increase by 20 marks, say, is because the questions were doable, but the questions were lengthy. So quant section, last year's 99 percentile cutoff was about 24 marks. This year we are saying 27. So is it only one more question easier? No. It's about, I would say, 8 more questions easier. But the problem is that you have got only 40 minutes.
Only 40 minutes. So that adds to the difficulty of that. But also the length of the questions in each of these slots, I believe, was a bit more in general. So that again adds to the second layer of difficulty on the quantitative ability section. That is why we believe it can add max of 2 questions in Varun slots where we are looking at 30 marks at a 99 percentile. Between slot 1 and slot 3, I believe at 27, 28 around, it should be a 99 percentile on translation.
So 95 percentile.
I think 99 overall was between 88 to 92. 95.
95 percentile, I think this year is going to lie somewhere between 65 to 70. Last year it was actually less than 60. Even people who have gotten 57, 58 ended up with a 95 percentile. This year, I think it's going to lie somewhere around 66, 67. That is what our perception is. Generally, that is the difference between a 99 and a 95 percentile score. And I feel that people who have done decently well in all three sections could have gotten a 13 BRC, could have gotten a 20 in quant, and could have gotten, say, another 18, 20 in DILR, and they would have ended up with a 95 percentile, which would be around 65, 66, 67. So that is what I feel is going to be the cutoff.
Agreed. 95 looks good there at about 67, 68.
And 90 would go at
90 would go at somewhere between 50 and 55. Then I feel that anyone.
last year it was 45.
Last year it was 45. It was pretty low. I don't think it's going to go that low this year because even if you practice quant a bit, you in that for 40 minutes people could have solved 4 or 5 questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you're solving 4 or 5 questions in quant and then LRD, you're doing one sec and you're doing decently well in VRC, you can touch that 50 mark. So 51, 52, 53 marks is where I think the 90 percentile score might land.
It can go to
Somewhere
a
close
54,
to
55.
55.
54, 55 also can be a 90 percentile. It's a touch difficult to predict when we come lower on the percentile level. So at 90 percentile should be between 53, 54 marks is what the general consensus between the two of us is.
Finally, to end with, I just want to go on a mini rant on why I did not like the paper said by IIM Calcutta. I mentioned this in the small reel that I put up in which I spoke about slot 2. I feel that CAT as a paper has been very beautiful, especially in 21, 22, 23 when Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Lucknow conducted the paper. That a lot of preparation and conceptual clarity was actually tested across all the sections. In this paper, VRC, I felt it was actually tested that who was being able to think through the questions, reason out the answers, that skill was tested. But LRD and quant leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth because again, it is calculation speed that is being tested. And oftentimes in a lot of LRDI questions and also in a few quant questions, it actually tested how quickly you can use the on-screen calculator. I feel for the students who might have gotten a slightly old and rickety system where their mouse is not working properly, I have had people complaining that the calculator has glitched out for them. Those people have been dealt with very unfairly or dealt a very unfair hand, and their scores will suffer because of that. And we can blame it on fate or luck, but CAT should not set a paper which is actually dependent upon how quickly someone can calculate it or how quickly someone can use a calculator. I feel that a lot more depth of thought needs to be tested by the CAT paper, which I feel was not present in LRDI and the quant section. Plus, I feel that the difficulty of the paper should be determined by the level of difficulty of the questions. Here, the difficulty level of the paper was being determined by how long it is. I can make a question difficult by making it a combination of 3 different questions. That is not a well thought out question. So I feel that better thought out questions could have been put, maybe slot 3 quant was like that. But slot 1, slot 2 quant and LRD, I feel that could have been better thought out in terms of
DILR definitely.
DILR definitely. Across all 3 slots, I think a bit more of thinking capability could have been actually tested on them.
So nobody spent a lot of time in designing those questions, thinking about how the student would think through the questions.
But the thing that I liked about this year's paper is at some level, they've tried to ensure that all 3 slots behave in a slightly similar fashion. So if I look at the LRDI sets, I also had a set which had a graph on it. I also had a set which had a bar graph on it. So, and this is very similar to the first slot, I believe. So they've tried to somewhere, and quant questions also we've looked at that, the questions will look very, very similar. Although there can be a negative to this that somebody would divulge the question to the second set, but I don't think that creates too much of a problem with just about 1.5 hour between the 2 sets, two of the slots. So that cannot be leaked so very easily, so quickly to so many number of people, and you can't do anything about it. So there I think they tried to do a good job that scaling is something that might happen to a lower side, and you might not find too much variance in terms of one slot and behavior with respect to the other slot. So that is one point where I'll say they did a fair job with trying to standardize across it.
Agreed. Standardization of paper was much better than last year for
Yes.
sure. Right. So with that, we are done with the analysis.
Yeah.
Look ahead now. Forget about the CAT paper. Whatever we have done is more than enough. Look ahead to SNAP. Look ahead to ZAT. There is a lot more to be achieved this year. So all the best for the remaining exams, and we'll see you all again.
All the best.
All the best.